insights into the innovations and revolutions of the marketing world. Welcome to the Marketing Scientists Podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Marketing Scientists. Today's a special one. This is a repeat telecast of our office hours session with Tara Silha. Tara has a ton of experience with stints at Quince, Carewell, and the RealReal, and knows everything about TV and CTV buying. We're going to cover lots of great detail, so let's dive straight in. So welcome everybody. We're going to kick off our second ever live session. And this one's going to be all about TV and how it is very much alive. So we're going to talk about that. I'm joined here today by Tara Silha. Hopefully I didn't completely butcher your last name.
You got it.
All right, perfect. So Tara, why don't you do a quick intro about your background? I have something up on the screen here, but tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, then we'll jump into sort of the actual content for today.
Yeah, great to kind of see everyone, know that you're out there. But really great to do this with you, Pranav. But yeah, I've been in the industry longer than I care to admit. I started out in a very direct response, focused small niche agency, kind of went then more to your parent company agency, and then went over to the sales side for a little bit, sold some Spanish language TV, and then went to the client side, first client being the RealReal. So I've kind of done it all, I feel like, which has really helped in my career understand all the different aspects, different sides of everything, but always really with direct response TV in focused as well. So I feel like performance media has always been my focus. And, it's really interesting how I feel nowadays. Everybody's about performance media. All these even legacy clients now want to understand, where are my conversions coming from? It's not just about, let me buy GRPs out there and get as many impressions as I can, but it's actually really, what are those doing for us? How are they converting? So I feel like I've come full circle to really get away from the 1-800 number, which I'm not going to lie, I do miss. Very easy to do attribution around TV with 800 numbers to what we see now with web-based.
So I will say one thing right off the bat is some people actually just put all of TV into brand, right?
Correct.
So I'm talking from the perspective of what I would say not a traditional sort of media buyer, right? This is me who's mostly worked in tech and tech brands, and we think of Google and Meta as performance, and we think of TV as brand, right? And when I say we, that's not my personal opinion, so I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just saying that's the general perception of the industry. And what I have to tell people, hey, direct response advertising on TV has existed for decades. So exactly to your point, this 1-800 number or other mechanisms, other call to actions, and being able to kind of measure the impact of those, it's gotten harder because there's all this other type of media that's also around. So it's harder to kind of get the signal from the noise, but the idea that TV is just brand is not true. And so exactly. I love that starting point. So we have a packed agenda. We're going to talk about all of these things that are on the screen, and I have a bunch of questions for you. And to everybody who's attending, if you have questions, please throw them into the Q&A box and we'll take them live. But we do have an icebreaker to start with, and maybe Tara, I'll start with you. What's the last ad that you saw on TV or streaming that you actually paid attention to, that actually grabbed your mind share?
It's really funny, don't get upset with me, but it was actually an Angi ad. And it's because I work there now. And I always get excited when I see our ads on TV that we place. So, because for me, I'm always like, okay, how is this looking? Is it running correctly? Where are we running it? What's coming after us? Where are we falling? And it happened to be on the NFL network, which was great. Like, we ran in game day. It was like 11:30 a.m. Pacific. So I was like, oh my God, this was perfect timing. And we were actually out. It was really interesting. We were watching it on my husband's phone. We were watching the game because we were out eating breakfast, if you can believe it, that late. And everybody that was around us was kind of watching our phone because everybody wanted to watch the game that we were watching. So it was really, so for me, that's my ad.
All right, cool. I am so biased that I don't like, I pay attention to, once I started doing this job, I pay attention to all ads. And it
Yeah.
feels like I don't have, like, I am not a good judge anymore of advertising and what's actually creating an impression. Because, so I will say the one that I remember, this is a fun story. There used to be, this is very weird. There's a cooking oil in India when I was growing up. So this is not a recent ad. This is from like my childhood. And the story was just so amazingly hilarious. It's a 7-year-old who leaves the house because he's upset with something. And then the house, caretaker goes running behind him and it says, "Hey, you know what's cooking at home? And there's some like special dish that's being made at home." And so that entices the kid to go back home and not like run away. And the whole ad is about a cooking oil. And I was like, it's
Wow.
still stuck in my head 30 years later, right? Which is, I think, a pretty cool ad. So that's my favorite one. It's not recent, but that's a good one. Okay, another poll. This is mostly for everybody who's listening in. So if you don't mind sharing, are you using TV advertising today? And here are your options. If you don't mind, just put in, use your camera to scan the QR code and see if you can answer this poll. We'll see what everybody sort of responds back with at the end of this session. And with that, I am going to kick us off and get into the content. So Tara, when I first reached out to you about, doing this office hours with us, and we were talking about this, right? A lot of people have this perception that TV is declining or TV is dead and all the attention is now on, Meta and TikTok and Instagram Reels. We were literally talking about this, at the beginning of the call. What's your perspective? We obviously have some, numbers and slides here, but what's your perspective on what's happening with TV? What are people getting wrong?
Yeah, I think the problem is people aren't understanding that TV isn't just your cable box and, traditional way of everybody sits down at a certain time in the evening and watches a certain program on a certain day. It's not like that anymore. It's actually evolved to so much more, and that CTV has really helped that. People always tell me to, okay, digital. And I'm always asking them, what are you talking about digital? When I say offline and they're like, oh, CTV is digital. I'm like, to me, I always put CTV with traditional offline media, not online, excuse me, not digital. I don't call it digital. I just think it's still watching that content on the big screen in your living room that's not clickable, that it's just a matter of how you're getting that. Are you getting it through a cable box? Are you getting it through a device such as a Roku? Are you using an app like an internet connection? But at the end of the day, you're still watching TV. And
Yep.
That's really why I think a lot of people are like, no one's watching it anymore. These younger generations, they don't know what cable is. Well, sure, maybe they don't know what cable is, but do they know who the Tiger King is? Or do they know, Taylor Swift's Eras concert? Like, how many people are watching that? It's just, do they know the Super Bowl? Like, they're watching. They just don't understand the difference of how they're getting that content served to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think one thing that, I think about for my own personal usage, I have 2 young kids, and which means if we are watching TV as a family, it's their choice, not mine, right? There are rare times when I get to pick my choice of TV.
Yeah.
And the things where we can watch it together is actually most live content. So sports are a great way for me to watch it with my kids and what have you. And I recently also found out that the top 100 shows on linear are now mostly all live shows,
Yes.
which is fascinating. So what's happening here is I think the, TV is transforming a little bit, because if it's a pre-recorded show, you can watch it anytime. If it's live, it's live. And so
Right.
that was really interesting to me, and which also means TV is probably getting more expensive. Is that right, or do I have that wrong?
I would say it's getting more expensive for sports, live
Right.
sports. Absolutely. News, always. That's
Right.
another thing you're always going to want to see live, right? Especially local. People really trust local news, and they're always going to continue to watch that. So I'd say certain genres are getting more expensive, but when it comes to your point, like something that you can watch on demand, watch later, something that's not like a priority where you really need to see it in the moment, actually that's decreasing in rates. So
Gotcha.
in CPM and cost. So
Gotcha.
still
And
being watched, but much
yeah,
more
yeah, yeah,
affordable.
yeah. And when you think about that CTV bucket, right? So what we have on the slide here is for people who are listening in, there's the black bar for CTV that's like increasing in volume. There's a red bar for, TV that's kind of reducing in volume in terms of the total spend that we are seeing. And one of the questions I have for you on the CTV side is, do you then, like, if I'm watching something on my iPad or on my MacBook and watching Game of Thrones or whatever, like, latest Apple TV movie, like, that goes into that CTV bucket even if I'm not watching on the big screen.
Correct.
Okay, great. Now, when you think about sort of what's driving this increase in share for CTV compared to TV, it's obviously sort of the consumption habit of the consumer, right? Which is people just wanting to do this on different types of screens and what have you. But the overall line is going up and to the right, a pretty healthy CAGR. And so the thing that's very curious to me is, like, how is media buying changing from the old school to the new school? And maybe we'll cover that because I know we have a
We
slide
will.
about it. So we will cover that, but let's put a pin in that and come back to it. Let's talk about sort of the concept of TV and digital working together. And I know you put CTV and T. So for the rest of this session, we're going to talk about TV as both the traditional TV and CTV. But let's talk about the interaction between the two and how you think about media buying and measurement when it comes to understanding what's working across both.
Yeah, I think the big thing is you have to understand that they do work together. And when we've really put them into silos, we're really missing out on how they actually do work together, right? So TV has always been a top of the funnel metric, right? It's really to kind of get that awareness out there, to really kind of tell that story in a way, an amount of time and in a way that you just can't get on social or any other digital channel, right? So you kind of need that in the beginning to really get that customer journey started, I think. And it really does, as you start going through the funnel and you're watching, you really do see that it's not only just building awareness of your brand, but it is also encouraging them to search it, right? So you do see that brand search increase. And you do then help push that along the funnel to where it does get to the point where digital comes in and really kind of closes it. So it's kind of like always selling, right? You're starting at getting people interested in your brand, getting them aware of it, and then you have your closer that comes in and really does that. And that's what digital does then, right? So I always look at it as, like, I love this, where TV is the demand generator, right? Creating that awareness. But your online channels like search, pay, social is really that capturer. And that's what each of their jobs is really to do, right? To just say, the problem with just, if you only look at TV as a bottom funnel, you're really, most company, and I've worked for this, most brands then right away, it does cost, it is a little more expensive. So it does have a higher cost per, it does take a longer time for them to convert. Most brands then have pulled media from the channel because they're like, oh, it's too expensive, it's not working, we don't need it, right?
Yeah.
So they just continue with their online or just going after that bottom of the funnel, and people that are already ready to commit, they already have that intent. So now you're just paying more to get those people. And what so many times this has happened where all of a sudden then those conversions start to decline, and
Right.
because you're not bringing anyone new in. So I've had this happen so many times where then it's panic sets in, and it's like, quick, we need to get TV back up and running. So I just feel like, okay, this is part of the process sometimes where people don't understand how much TV is really helping that bottom of the funnel, but it's not its job alone to do that. It has to work together.
Yeah, you said a couple of things that are really interesting to me. So, what ends up happening, to your point, is if you're going to measure TV purely by, the number of sales you got on that day, or if you're a SaaS company, the number of signups that you got on that day, the number of orders, right? For Angi, it's probably orders and transactions. You're missing out on that on that point about, hey, sometimes there's a much longer lag effect for these types of campaigns. And how do you measure that lag effect? And I find search query volume as a pretty interesting sort of way to look at that leading indicator of that potential lag effect. Now, I have a spicy question. What if you don't see any movement in search query volume? What would you do if you're a TV buyer? You're like, hey, we ran this amazing TV. It did fantastically in pre-testing, right? The concepts and the focus groups did great. We launched it. We didn't see branded searches go up and to the right. How would you diagnose that?
A lot of that depends on like testing your creative in a panel environment where that's their job. Like, look at these ads, tell us what you think. It's very skewed to actually seeing them in market and real time watching them on TV, right? And maybe we're not hitting the right audience. Maybe you're not in the right spot. Maybe they're not seeing it enough. Maybe you're only focused on linear and you're only picking, very niche networks because you don't have a lot of budget. So your reach is very small. So there's a lot of things that you look into with that. And then you have if you need some time too to do your brand lift studies, I think too, to really kind of see how are people resonating with these ads and with your brand. Are you even getting response from your ads? That's pretty easy to see, like to your point, if you're not seeing that search volume, clearly these aren't resonating in real time. So I think that's what you really kind of have to look at is just look at the creative, look at where you're actually running it, look at what your reach is, look at what that frequency is. And are you, really kind of focus in on that target? Are you actually targeting the right audience? You could, I could say at the RealReal, when I worked there, we always thought like, oh, from the get-go, it's women 35 plus. That's it. That's our only demo. And people didn't think CTV or streaming would work because it was too young, scaled young. So as we started actually introducing that channel, in addition to our linear, we actually saw that 18, to 34 group actually increased. And we weren't losing household income with with that demographic. We actually were like, wow, we actually have a totally different audience that we wouldn't have even knew existed had we not tested something new, right? And changed our creative. That's the other thing. The creative was always targeting that specific women 35 plus. It's like, well, men like nice things too. So, what about them? What are we doing for that demographic? And what are we doing to not necessarily use the same people in our ads, but really get that diversity in there to show that we're not being exclusive, we're being inclusive. So all those actually really helped.
That's a great point, Tara. And I think something that we forget is like, hey, just like in digital, you're not going to get your first TV spot and then just nail it. There's a lot of iteration in exactly what you said. So let's maybe sort of enumerate the factors there, right? So it's obviously your demographic. That's a huge point. And then being able to say that, hey, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong, right? I'm like doing this as a learning mindset. So for your demographic, you're really trying to say, what are the shows, the channels, that your demographic is more likely to be watching or not? And how do you get that information? Like, do you just ask this to the networks? Do you do your own research? Like, what is your best practice in figuring that out?
Yeah, there's, a lot of it is art and science and being in the marketplace and understanding these networks, buying them for so long, watching them. What the audience is, what that demographic is, but there's a lot of tools out there too, like MRI, that you can actually put in what you're looking for and they will pull up networks, basically where your audience is for linear. For streaming, obviously, you can really put that targeting in where you want to target these specific audiences to make sure you're hitting them. But that's really using a lot of the tools that are around to do your research.
Okay, then the next question I have for you, so there's the demographic, then there's the actual sort of, time of day and media buying strategy. Like, how do you think about that? Do you just like buy whatever, or can you be much more directed in, and I guess time of day is probably more relevant to linear than CTV, right? Because
Correct.
CTV is like pretty much anytime. So how do you make that decision when you are sort of kind of running this for Angi or for the RealReal or for, any other brand?
Yeah, I think it's about two when we see where those audiences are watching, where we see the higher amount of impressions, where we have a better CPM, of course. Everybody wants to be in prime time. That's not necessarily our best performance driving day part, right? There's a lot of clutter. There's a lot of,
Right.
your share of voice there is much smaller. You're competing against a lot to really break through. So you have to, I always found those other day parts, such as daytime or early fringe, are actually gold mines because the people that are there watching those time of day, and you'd be surprised, they're definitely smaller than prime, obviously, but they're actually very responsive. They're actually engaged with your ads. They're actually interested in those ads and they actually respond to them. So
Right.
I find, again, it's really kind of testing everything. I'm a big fan of testing everything. Overnights, late night, overnight. I think late night used to do a lot better than what it does now. I don't think it's as performance driven day part as it used to be in the past. I think, especially on linear, you hear that even late night television is really on the decline.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
Lots of news about that recently. Okay,
Yes.
so totally
But
fair,
yeah.
right? So we talk about demographic, we talk about sort of time of day. The third thing that's really interesting for me is the length of the spot. So talk a little bit about both on CTV and linear. How do you think about 15-second versus 30-second versus 60 seconds, or what's your strategy behind those?
I think it depends, again, who you're trying to reach, right? So if you really want to go after that older audience and you really have a complicated brand or product or service, I love a 60-second for that, right? But for me, a 30-second, I think is, especially if you're a new brand launching, 30-second, is great, a good amount of time. You're not losing the audience. They're still attentive. You still have enough time to get your point across. Plus, really show your call to action, really kind of drive that home too. And then I tend to, after they've seen that ad enough, you don't need a full 30 seconds anymore. You can really cut back to a 15 because people now are aware of your brand, that you've had enough frequency for that 30. So you can really improve your frequency and probably test other day parts, other networks, really expand with a shorter length to the 15.
Got it. Okay, that's very tactical. So if Paramount was to start advertising on CTV, you'd recommend 30 seconds first.
I would.
Okay, cool. Let's move into the next section, which is all about measurement. So let's talk about measurement and what your perspective is on measuring TV and CTV, and then we'll sort of move into buying after that. I have a bunch of questions there as well.
Yeah. So for me, measurement is really I'm really all about attribution, right? So since we don't have last click, I hate when I work for a performance company and they, want to see results and everything is last click. I'm like, we're not last click. Of course I'm going to look horrible. So let's find other ways to really measure this, right? And the problem is, like we talked about, you see something, you watch it on that large screen, but you're not taking action on the screen, right? Not clickable. You're using another device. So a lot of times something else is going to get credit for it, right? It's going to go to search or it's going to go to social. It's going to get a different, different attribution, right? So, and there's too short of those attribution windows as well. A lot of people use a 7-day look back. And again, that's just way too short of a time. I feel even 30 days is too short. So, you do get a lot of what we call drag. You get a lot of people that might not see it right away, right? Maybe they're watching it on demand days later, or maybe even weeks later, and then they're taking action. And you are able to attribute that back now. So you can see, but all that drag, it takes time. So I think that's one challenge that we're facing, right? That people have. The cross-device channel fragmentation for sure. Who saw what, when, where, why, all those, really require some sort of advanced measurement platform, such as an MMM, an MTA. And a lot of those are expensive. Let's face it. People don't want to invest in that, especially if they don't really know if this is a channel they want to continue in. So that's a challenge, right? There's limited access to data, walled gardens. We hear it all the time, but it couldn't be more true, where that really affects overall attribution and measurement and outcomes as well. And then even if you do pick like a platform like an iSpot or an Innovid to really do your offline measurement attribution, they all have different methodologies and they have different identity graphs and they have different attribution windows. And it's so much to look at each one and really understand the differences and decide which is best for you. So all of that makes it so difficult for us.
Yes. And that's actually how we met, right? At one of your prior companies, we were pitching you to try and sort of, and for all, reasons it didn't work out at that point, but your point is really valid. And what's interesting to me is like this issue is persistent across multiple channels. It's not just on TV, right? So I'll give you an example from my personal life. I was on my Instagram feed, so I do have social, and I saw an ad from Misen. I hope I'm pronouncing it correct. It's a cookware brand, and we have one of their knives, and I like their knife. Okay, so they had an ad for a pan. And I remember my wife and I were talking about we need a new pan. So I sent it to her in a DM, and because she's my boss, right, at home. She's the one who's actually making the decisions. And she's like, hey, this looks cool. We'll buy it when we have space for another pan in the whatever. And then we forgot about it. And then, maybe it was months later that she's like, hey, we're finally ready for a pan. And we go and, buy a Misen. And where did we buy it from? From Amazon, I think. And so there's no way that you're going to be able to get that attribution in that. And it's especially hard for these long tail, longer term type of things. So great point, and particularly hard for TV and CTV. So let's talk about sort of how do you, what does modern TV buying then look like? Let's go through point by point. Like tell me, what used to be the case, what is the case now? And I have a bunch of questions for you here as well.
Yeah. So, originally, and this is how I started out too, was we looked at program specific time of day. It's that, like I said before, that appointment viewing, right? And, you're buying GRPs, and that's really all you cared about.
For us new people, what are GRPs?
Like gross rating points. So it's really kind of what Nielsen is saying. People are watching. So these are the shows you want to be in because it has the highest viewership and they're probably going to do best for you, right? Because that's who you want to attract that large audience. So these are the shows you want to be in.
Got it. So that was the old school way. Yeah.
Yes. And, for me, a GRP doesn't mean a conversion. It doesn't equate to a conversion. So something you got to remember. It was only linear focused, right? We didn't really have CTV back then. Everything was just linear. Hence, the 1-800 number era too. Fixed buys and upfronts. They still exist today. They're definitely different looking. I think a lot more people are moving more into a scatter place. I think they're realizing they do not have to buy upfront. And it's just things have progressed, I think, beyond just buying that upfront.
Can you talk about that? What does it mean to do a fixed buy or an upfront buy versus what is a scatter approach? To talk to me about what the difference is there.
Yeah. So basically with upfronts, you're going to lock in, you're going to go and see what everybody's previewing at upfront week and see what programming's coming out. And then you're going to negotiate with the networks and you're going to lock in for pretty much a year, quarter by quarter, what shows you want to buy, how many impressions you're looking to get, have that negotiated rate. And, you can cancel, but they're usually, a 90-day cancellation window. So you're really committed, right?
Gotcha.
You do have guarantees with those where if you don't hit the amount of impressions that you negotiated up front, you do receive, if you wait to make up for it.
And I would imagine if you're a large buyer, right? You're a national buyer, you're buying, I don't know, 100 million plus of TV, you probably would benefit from doing that upfront buy because you've kind of have everything on dialed in. Is that the correct perception? But maybe not economical for a smaller buyer.
Correct. Cool. Definitely, like if you're just starting out or you're a smaller brand, you're definitely not looking to do upfront buys yet. For sure.
Makes sense.
Legacy brand, sure, especially with certain events like the Super Bowl or the Olympics, things like that you actually do want to negotiate in advance because The scatter market then, which is basically buying what's left over at whatever that current market value is of it. Sometimes you can really get a great deal on it. Like if they can't sell for whatever reason, like the Olympics, maybe during COVID, things weren't as going as well then, you can get a great deal,
So
but
you mentioned scatter. I've also heard the term remnant. I think those are the same things, or are they different things?
so remnant, for me, remnant media has such a negative connotation, and it was always used with direct response media. And it always, I felt people meant or believed it to be, all you're going to get when you buy remnant is overnights, because that's the only thing that hasn't sold. And that's so not true. So that's, you still get when you buy direct TV, when you're buying DRTV, you get that you can buy that same inventory. You're just buying it differently. You're buying on a broad rotator versus a program specific guaranteed buy. So there's no guarantees with DRTV that you're going to run or that you're going to hit a certain amount of impressions, but you pay less for it because you're taking that chance.
Got it. So you think that bias, that negative connotation is not really valid? That if you hear remnant or you hear scatter, that doesn't mean it's a necessarily bad thing and it's
Correct.
all overnight. Okay, great.
Correct.
That's good to know. It's like, and maybe you can ask your rep, whoever you're buying from, like, tell me a little bit more about what I can expect from the remnant. Is that the right way to approach it? Or really nobody has visibility because you won't know until the day comes. It's a little bit opaque.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can get pre-logs and you can see where you're going to be placing for that week, but it's not exact yet until it runs. So
Makes
you
total
can
sense.
get preempted.
All right, so let's talk about the modern buyer, right? So we talked about sort of what happened in the past, and we already covered a bunch of topics, but talk to me about sort of what a modern buyer is doing. What does your week to week or month to month look like when you're running this operation for Angi today? Like what are the rituals that you have in your TV buying, and talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think a big thing is that we're not just looking at programs and specific times anymore. We do still focus heavily on impressions to put our buys together. But then I think it's really more about outcomes. Like we really look at performance, and we do look at attention. What's our response rate looking at? What's our visit rate looking at? So, and we do target in on segments too. We pay more attention to the audience, right? And I think the big thing too nowadays is we're not just linear anymore. We are adding CTV to that. We're heavily into streaming. We're also doing audio. We're also possibly doing out of home. Like there's so many channels now. It's not just really linear focused like it was in the past. And like we have these advanced tools too, where I
have a question for you, Tara, on that point about segments. So do you structure your campaigns in a way where you can see performance for those different segments? Or is it more about, hey, we're going to get a bunch of stuff out, but you're still looking at performance in a holistic way across the entire CTV or TV bucket?
We're looking at it holistically across all, to be honest. If we're doing programmatic, we do separate it out by segment. But for the main direct IOs we're doing, it's really kind of looking at it all holistically.
And I have another question here, which is when you're doing these buys, right? So you mentioned you've had a history of doing linear, you're adding CTV, and you're unique because you're buying directly from the networks. You're not using one of the middleware solutions like a Tatari or a Mountain or another CTV platform. Is that right?
We do use Mountain for programmatic, but we will block out those publishers that we're actually buying direct.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. So you're kind of it makes sense. For CTV, you need something. So that's why you have Mountain, and there's many solutions. I'm also seeing new solutions launch very aggressively, right? So Paramount has a solution, Universal has a solution now. And then you have obviously Mountain, we have Vibe.co. I think that's a new company. What do you think is happening there in terms of like the CTV? I almost think of it as fragmentation. Maybe it's good, right? Because the buyer has so much choice to make different decisions. But how do you evaluate which platform you're going to work with? When are you going to go direct to the network for linear? Why not do go through a middleware solution for even buying linear? Like, I'm curious how you think about that.
I mean, for me, like I like doing things in-house, right? I feel like I like that one-on-one. I like learning more about the network. I like developing that relationship myself rather than relying on an agency to purchase it on my behalf. I think too, just kind of doing it yourself. Nobody knows your brand better than you, right? So I think just having that one-on-one connection, you actually can find some other ways with the network besides just running, your 15s and 30s to really find different, new formats to actually test and learn and really kind of expand on those networks. We love going publisher direct too with CTV. I don't think we need to go onto Paramount Plus's platform and put our information in and, have their system, find our audience for us and all of that. We don't have time for all that, I should say, to manage all those different platforms to do that. So I'd rather really work direct again there too. Like, here's a direct IO. This is what our goals are. This is what we're looking for. I really trust you to do this for us. You put this in for us and kind of we're managing it together when we see results.
Got it. There's a question in the chat, so I'll ask a couple of these. So one is there any advantage to using a CTV specific platform like a Mountain compared to using a platform that has both CTV and linear like a Tatari?
Again, I think it's, what you want to do, what you're looking for with each of these channels. I don't think necessarily one's better than the other, to be honest. I've worked with Tatari. They were our agency when I was at Quince. So they did do our buying for us for both linear and CTV. But then now I've always done Mountain on my own when I worked brand direct. So
it's a little bit of a personal preference thing,
yeah,
I think. And
that's how I would view it. Correct.
And I think there is like for any of these online platforms, the new CTV platforms or sort of, these solutions that are making it easier. I think if you're starting out new, I would be lost if I were try to do what you're doing, which is going direct to a network. So
Correct.
they make it easy for you to get started, and then you try a bunch of these out and see which one sort of, does the right thing for you, and scale from there. So that makes sense. There was another question. Let's talk about the measurement piece. We didn't cover that yet. What are you when you're making these media buys, how are you thinking about measurement differently from just, attribution and last click?
So I think we're looking at it a little more like what do we want to look at, right? Are we looking at for definitive answers to make decisions, precision, or are we kind of trying to be a little more practical and seeing like where we are seeing that brand search increase, after we run some of these ads, what are we seeing then? I think we're looking at too, a lot of it is incrementality, right? So when we're seeing that group that's been exposed to comparing it with that, control group that hasn't been exposed and seeing that lift then from that is really kind of what we're focusing on right now to see how our performance is. And, are we making the right decision? Are we on the right channels? We are seeing that for linear by network, and we are seeing it by publisher on the CTV side.
Got it. On that point, Tara, something that I've heard many times from larger media buyers is that it's really hard to do incrementality testing on TV because there's a perception that buying regional is more expensive than buying national.
It's true.
Okay, great. So that's good validation that that's true.
Yeah.
How do you counter that then in, the day-to-day? Like, how do you then actually run a lift study, or you're doing it in some small pockets and then kind of saying that, hey, if we're getting that signal on this, on this CTV thing, which we can run geo-targeted campaigns, we're going to take that result and kind of apply that to linear as well. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, with linear, yeah, that's one way, correct, doing it. The other way is really with linear is pulse strategy. So right. Let's say we're running on air for 3 weeks heavy, right? And then we're going to take off 3 weeks and we're
right.
going to kind of see what's happened. So
right.
there are ways to do it. where it doesn't just have to be geo-testing on the linear side. But geo-testing is much easier with CTV.
Perfect. Would you recommend a small brand? There's another question, a small brand to buy direct with networks, or do you think that that's not a good idea?
I think it depends if you have someone that has the experience.
Right.
If you have someone that knows TV and can do that, absolutely. I mean, I've started a lot of in-house media agencies, and I've started with, a very small brand too. But if you don't, I would recommend an agency like a Tatari to really kind of get you started.
Right. Okay. Another question here. So this is Katie. When I bought TV a very long time ago, one thing we always did was try to focus on first pod, the slot right after a show goes to commercial break, or the last pod slot before the show starts back up. Is this still a thing?
I think it is when you're looking at upfronts. Yes, I do think it is still a thing. It's funny because I also love buying what we call blended 20s on some networks. Usually they're like the game shows, but you'd have your 5-second prehand, like brought to you by or so-and-so, and then you have your tagline and it runs into your 15-second. And for those, I would say I wanted to be in the beginning or middle of the program. It didn't really matter which pod positioning so much, but it did matter where in the pod, I should say I was. It just mattered. I wanted to be in the middle or the beginning because I knew at the end we tested it, they did not work. So I think it's a lot of testing still, but I don't think it's so much for me anyway. It's not about necessarily where I fall in that pod, but I do think people still look to be the first or second position.
All right, cool. Very interesting question from Corina here. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. What is the biggest miss you see when it comes to the creative itself with CTV?
So I think the biggest miss, it's not necessarily just with CTV, but I think it happens with TV in general. It really depends what you're looking to do, right? I think, are you explaining who you are, your brand? Is it clear? Is it engaging? Do people want to get to know your brand? Are you really kind of telling that story to the audience that's actually interested in it, right? I think a lot of times people create, are looking to have these fabulous looking creatives, and it doesn't need to be that complicated and spend a ton of money on it. And, we're not looking to win awards here with our TV creative. We're actually looking to drive awareness and at the end game, drive performance, drive that conversion. So I think that's what people focus too much on, is they're just trying to elevate it so much that for TV and CTV, you don't need to do that.
Fascinating. I'm sure there'll be lots of people in the industry who will have something to say about that one.
I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, and I am not a creative expert, believe me. But just from again, these are all based on my experience.
Totally. Yeah. And, no, I completely agree with you.
And what I found working in the direct response industry. So.
Yeah, I think we all get very fascinated as marketers. We all get very fascinated with like, hey, this it doesn't pop, right? Like it's like we get fascinated with that whole sort of line of thinking, and we forget that what is the job? The job is, have you really articulated the pain point?
Yes.
And have you then articulated how you solve that pain point? I don't even think it's about the competition, frankly. As long as the pain point is very clear and how you solve that pain point, and if it's viable and economical, somebody will go check it out.
Yeah. And it has to be relatable, right?
It has to be relatable. Yeah.
That's a big thing. I look at these, I always bring this up because I don't understand these creatives, and maybe if there's anyone out there that works on these type of creatives, but for fragrances, I don't understand what you're trying to do in those creatives. I don't know how, I'm going to pick on Johnny Depp, but I don't know how Johnny Depp playing a guitar in the desert would make me want to buy Sauvage. It's just not, it's not making sense to me. It just seems overly dramatic and makes me actually think, ew, ick. It leaves me like an ick factor. Like I have no desire to buy cologne because this is not what I'm looking for. So
all right,
that's just again my opinion. please don't take offense, anyone. But I never
Hey, it's
understand.
good to have strong opinions. No, this is great. One other question: any pitfalls to avoid with incrementality testing on a DMA basis for CTV? Are there, obvious sort of issues or mistakes that you've seen in testing for CTV stuff?
I just think you want to really make sure that you pick the right DMAs that for your, that you are going to be watching and you are going to be targeting and using for that geo test,
And
having
when you say the right DMAs, do you mean like knowing whether your audience is well represented in those, or are you thinking something else?
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's also, if it's too big, it's not going to work, in my opinion.
Right.
It's going to be skewed too much, right? I
Right.
think, but you do want to make sure that you're picking those geos where you have seen some success, but
Yeah.
where you actually think like, okay, these have potential to actually grow, and actually they're going to be statistically significant as well too, to really
Yeah.
prove out that incrementality.
Okay. Cool. All right. One last question from me, and then we'll bring it to a close. So, what creative format, we touched on a little bit, or storytelling trend, like are there proven things or frameworks from your perspective as a media buyer that you can go back to your creative team and say, like, hey, I definitely think these three things should be part of our creative arsenal when we go out and launch this campaign?
So
Yeah.
it's really funny. We're actually having a conversation now internally because we are looking to create new TV assets for next year. And, again, for performance driven, you definitely, to your point, you want to say what the problem is, right? And you want to talk about the reasons why you want to use your brand, reasons why you want to buy your product, what makes you different. And you really want to have a strong call to action, right? It doesn't have to always be either, call now or, visit now to get 20% off. Like you don't always have to give them percentages off, but it is like you do want to direct them to, visit us now or find your next pro. You want to have something that leads them to take that action. I think if you just try to be cute, I think at the end and just only show like your logo or have, I mean, I do like a good jingle, don't get me wrong. But I think if you're not really kind of driving them to perform that action, you are going to miss out.
Do you remember the Super Bowl ad from a few years ago from, I think it was Coinbase, that literally just had a QR code bouncing on the screen?
There's something to be said about that too, where, the Fire Festival, I believe too, just had that orange screen too, where everyone was like, what is this? What is this? And then, I always go back to the GoDaddy, the Super Bowl commercial with GoDaddy when Danica Patrick was unzipping her jacket and then they stopped and it was like, go to our site if you want to see the rest of it. And everyone like flooded, the GoDaddy site. So, I mean, things like that are genius, right? But I mean, they're only for that moment, right? They're not, and people aren't, you're driving traffic there that, they're trying to find out your brand. You're definitely getting that awareness, but you're driving a lot of unqualified traffic too. That is actually not really what you're looking for.
All right. Well, we already did a bunch of audience Q&A. So this was great, Tara. I learned a lot. I feel like I can confidently now go in and do some CTV for Paramount. We're not quite ready for linear or the Super Bowl, but hey, who knows? Maybe in a few years.
You never know.
You never know. And I know you mentioned you're not on social, so I can't tell people go connect with Tara on LinkedIn because she's not going to respond.
I mean, I will connect with you on LinkedIn for sure. That's different for me. But if you're trying to slide into my DMs, that won't happen. I don't know. So.
All right. Well, hopefully everybody learned a little bit from this session. We'll do another one on a fun topic around AEO in a few weeks. So answer engine optimization. Think of this as like what's happening with LLMs and all that fun stuff and the future of SEO and all that jazz. So tune in for that one. Tara, thank you so much for all of your great insights today and have a great long weekend.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, folks, that was Tara Silha, Director of Offline Media Strategy and Buying at Angi. Hope you learned everything you needed to know about TV and CTV buying, and tune in again next week for another episode of The Marketing Scientists. See you then.